Hi there, this is Saba from the City McWiggles project, the host of the City Talks Music podcast. Surprise! Welcome to a new segment of the show called Spotlight. Like I didn't already have enough on my creative plate, I've decided to attack a different angle of the Australian music scene. Why? You see, I've been recently going over all my channels, and I've noticed that I cover the Melbourne scene heaps. But I mean like heaps, maybe even too much. It shouldn't actually surprise anybody, let alone myself. The capital of the state of Victoria in Australia is where I used to live and where my adventure with blogging started. Melbourne also claims to be one of the live music capitals of the world, so tons of things are happening there every single night and day. Anybody who wants to be somebody in the music biz in the land down under, especially musicians looking to break through, will end up there at some point too. And again, just because I spent most of my time in Oz there in Melbourne, I'm familiar with the Melbourne-related people, places, events, etc. But it's time to get out of that comfort zone and shine a light on some other regions of Australia. And what better way to do it than speaking with the locals who live and breathe those other scenes. This, in a nutshell, is the idea behind Spotlight, ladies and gents. Now, just a heads up, these interviews will appear here with less frequency, because it's more about finding the right guide to the region I want to cover than producing the content just for the heck of it. And it just so happened that an awesome band based in the Barossa Valley reached out to me some time ago with their new release. So let's kick things off in South Australia, shall we? Now, I did visit Adelaide and the surroundings on an epic trip with a friend from Europe. A shout out to Bea here. But I can't say much about the local music scene, apart from a few artists who made it on the national or international level, like Hilltop Hoods, Paul Kelly, Sia or Cold Chisel. But Radelaide, as it's called sometimes, has heaps of hidden gems amongst its musos, it turns out. And I know it because Newgate Crowd is one of them.
To you that night. Do you remember what we used to do?
So meet Vidi, their singer and guitarist, Joey on the bass and backing vocals, who also does most of the talking in our chat, and Kai, who plays the drums and who unfortunately couldn't make it to our Zoom call. The trio got my attention because they play alternative rock, broadly speaking. And deep down in my heart, I'm still faithful to this genre I grew up on. Plus, Barossa Valley is one of the best regions in Australia and the world for, well, wine. And even though it has nothing to do with music and it makes me sound like I'm a boomer, I never say no to a glass of a good Shiraz. And I adore visiting cellar doors and vineyards. But going back to Newgate Crowd, they might be quite young, but their insights into the music scene in Adelaide are pretty on point. Considering they're also an emerging outfit, I gotta say they also surprised me a few times with their mature approach to this gig. Plus, it doesn't hurt that I actually dig their music. In fact, their single Change of Mood is the soundtrack to this interview. Before I leave you to it though, one more thing. Apologies in advance for the sound quality. Since I'm based in Europe, I have to resort to online tools to catch up with my guests. And not everything can be magically polished to perfection. So just keep that in mind, please. And I'm sure you'll enjoy this largely uncut conversation nevertheless. So, are you ready to get to know Newgate Crowd and the Adelaide music scene? Let's do it then. So tell me how your band started. I mean, I've read about it on the socials, obviously, and on your streaming platforms, but tell me in your own words, because there's always some juicy bits that you leave out because you don't want people to know. And I want to hear those juicy bits, okay?
So I met Joey first because my mum and his dad, who owns a coffee business in the Barossa region.
Okay.
Like my mum, just like, you know, what mums do, they talk, and what really like passionate fathers do, they talk as well. And then they're like, oh, my son plays guitar, and my son plays bass, and then they just put us in a room and
It was really awkward. Like this random kid who I've never met just walked into my house with a guitar, and I didn't know what to expect. But it was passionate. We had something that I don't think a lot of people share, and it was really beautiful. And we just took off from there into the sunset.
Mhm. So was it
And-
basically like a blind date, but not on, like on a different level, kind of on a musical
It was
level?
exactly like
exactly
the blind
like the
date,
blind
yeah.
date. I will get like continue with that. We actually had basically nearly a year's separation from each other
Mhm.
because I went into high school, and same with Joey. And then and I was playing with Kai a lot, like on the drums and guitar. Like we did like a little band, like junior high school
Yeah.
band, senior, middle. And then I was like, oh, I remember Joey plays bass. And then we just like all got together. Kai and Joey never met before. That was even more awkward, like a proper blind date. And I was just watching this. We actually, on that first practice in his big shed, like, just loud, Joey's like we write our first song Scissors on that first practice, and we wrote it on like an iPhone voice memo. And like listening back to it now, it's actually the exact same structure. Like you couldn't hear my vocals because I didn't sing in it, but yeah. And then since then we've just been jamming like all
Cool.
the time.
So can I just ask how old you are now?
We first met when I think I was 15 and you guys were 14, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm a year older. So I'm 18 now, and Kai and Video both 17.
yeah.
So the reason I'm asking you because what you're telling me sounds really like a Silverchair story, if you know what I mean. 3 guys.
Yeah.
And I was also going to say, like, when I was listening to your songs and you list your influences and you kind of put yourself in the alt indie rock kind of category, but I'm hearing like grungy bits there as well.
So you think I don't care about you? I'll lead us there. I gave you clues. Do you have anything to say? 'Cause I do. Change your mood.
So we know how you guys started, but that wasn't a long time ago, right? So maybe 4 or 5 years ago?
Probably it was like 2021.
No, end of 2020. Start of 2021 is when we kicked off with like gigs and all that. But and very end of 2020 was when we officially started. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, got together.
Yes.
So you started when Europe was already like closed down in lockdown because of the pandemic, but I guess in South Australia you weren't then confined yet, right? So
I think it was just after our lockdown, because I think mid 2020 we had a lockdown, and then we had a bit of a grace period between like end of 2020, start of 2021, and then we had another lockdown, like really big lockdown after that, and that that kind of put a pin in things, just having that huge lockdown, because that stopped gigs everywhere around Adelaide. And I think it was probably one of the best things for Adelaide as well, because as soon as gigs were up and going again, there was more people than ever at gigs, people were saying. And that was when we really started kicking off in Adelaide. And so we really, caught on to the, fast moving train there with all the people really eager to get out and see gigs. And that's when we were just starting up and getting things going. So yeah, it was pretty good timing.
yeah.
It was.
So that
Yeah.
tells me that you guys must be really good live. Like, if normally it's like you release music and then you gather fans and then they come to the gigs. But it looks like in your case, you started gigging and then your fan base was growing. Was that the case?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's especially in South Australia, it's a really small and very well self-kept place. Like everyone likes to keep to themselves. No one really likes to leave the house. But for those that do and go to gigs, that's how you gain the following. It's not through the streams or whatever. You get streams from the people who come to your gigs. And so you'll probably see that with a lot of South Australian artists, if they haven't toured, they have really low streams because the people who listen to their music are almost strictly the people who go to their gigs. Whereas if people have toured and whatnot, that's when things really start picking up for them.
Cool. But since we're on South Australia and you guys are based in Barossa still, or are you around Adelaide as well, or anywhere else?
Still all of us Barossa.
Yeah.
Right. So is there any like music scene around Barossa Valley itself, or do you have to actually go to the capital?
We always have to go to Adelaide. Like we tried a couple of gigs in the Barossa, but there's just no real enthusiasm, unfortunately. It's just rural community where it's an aging community as well. Like people come out here to retire, or they're
Wine.
5th generation been living in the Barossa Valley, and so they just stay for the wine and that's it. That's really all anyone comes here for.
Yeah.
Not your
Yeah.
target group. Yeah, I can imagine. So when you go to Adelaide, tell me about the city and the vibe of it, because I remember you've got this one suburb which is like on the sea, Glenelg Beach,
Yes.
and I can't remember any other name of the suburbs in Adelaide. So where are things happening?
So Adelaide's really small. I don't know if you remember, but there's hills nearby and there's a lookout, and you can see the entirety of Adelaide from just one lookout a couple of kilometres away. It's a very, very small city. And so all the good venues are right in the thick of it, right in the CBD. So in all the built up skyscrapers, there's just little venues, dingy pubs and all that around there. And yeah, they're all reasonably close together. Like a lot of people do gig hopping in Adelaide where, because everything's pretty much walking distance because it's such a small city, you can go and see 3-4 gigs in a night.
So for us, it's like an hour drive for each gig. And like most of the venues are all really close together. As Joey said, like it's just a short walk, you know. But there are a lot of, they're just like everywhere, you know, just any venue. And it's kind of just, when COVID happened, there was more coming out. There still isn't that many though, realistically. There's still like more getting made, I think I've heard too.
I just really all the same ones that I've always known about are still there, but it's probably wouldn't be more than 20, I don't think, gig venues. It's really reasonably quite small.
So Adelaide is basically like all over the place. There's no one place that you would go and consider like a music suburb.
There's something similar to that, but it's not exactly for gig venues. It's for the club venues, and there is a few places for gigs there, and that's called Hindley Street. And so there's this one stretch of street where they've put all the clubs just on one stretch, and there's not a lot of gigs there because people who go to clubs don't go to gigs, and it's a really, really bizarre like kind of facade. Like it's hard to explain. Like you can tell just by looking at someone visually that they go to gigs. You know, they have a very strong aesthetic in Adelaide. There's a lot of piercings, dyed hair, usually. It's covered in tattoos.
It's kind of like a youth thing, isn't it? Or very young people, you know, between like the ages like 15 or 16 to like...
Oh, even younger than that. There's like some 14 and 13-year-old kids getting out to gigs. It's crazy.
Yeah, but like between that and like, you know, not so old people, you know, so it's just become like a thing because a lot of people kind of want to escape at a very young age, you know. I think that's probably one of the reasons why. There's many reasons.
That's probably one of the best parts about Adelaide is that it's a really quite a safe city, and so there is just these young kids getting out to gigs, and parents are more than happy for them to be out there. And because Adelaide is so small, most gigs and even bigger shows are all ages events. And so touring festivals that go around Australia that are run by Triple J, almost all of them are all ages events just because Adelaide's so small and they have to really try and get as many numbers as they can.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I find that good in a way because I think it's good to encourage young people to get out to gigs because it's a really good thing, you know, it keeps them off the streets doing their drugs and whatnot.
From also your socials and your website, I can see that you've been actually gigging around a lot. So tell me, from and you probably have been going to a lot of gigs too. So from the perspective of a music fan, when you listen to a band, which is your favorite venue? And also when you play as a band, which is your favorite venue?
Listening to a band, I'd have to say Unibar. So it's in the Adelaide University campus and they have the venue there for the uni students. And purely because they've just dropped the most money in that place, they have very, very expensive sound system. And there's a proper built-up stage and everything. And then there's the whole LED screen behind the stage. And it's just all really well put together. And so it's really great to look and be in the audience there, but it's not the best to play at. What do you reckon would be one of the good ones to play at?
To play at, I do love Arthur Art. I do think it's a fun stage. It's actually quite a fairly new venue. Recently, it's actually had a lot of, like it shut down for a bit because it was... like a lot of venues, like with their licensing, they were overloading people for their capacity, not just at underage selling, but they've got back up because they've got their business sorted. And I think they've got new managers now, which might actually help get the place looking even better because the whole vibe of Arthur Art was like an arty kind of vibe, you know.
Yeah, there's like built up timber sculptures all throughout the place. And being in the crowd, that's sometimes pretty annoying because you're just hitting your shin against solid pieces of timber. But
Flower pots just in.
other than that, it's like it has a really cool aesthetic and feel to the place. And the sound guy that works there is the best in Adelaide. He's this really, really cool dude. And yeah, he always gets the best sound out of that place. And so playing there, definitely number one. And for both the gigs that we've played there, we've had some of the best turnouts there as well.
Yeah, very, very big, like full capacity. It's not a massive venue, but like I think, well, the first time we played there was about just over 100 people there. Wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's like plenty to look really packed. But the big time we done there was there was about 300 people there.
Wow.
And that was big, and we were the opening act, so that was like. That was a very great experience.
Yeah, and I think the best part about that is that everyone showed up for the opening act as well. 200 or more people just from the get-go. And yeah, there was just people just filtering, like squeezed out of the door. There's just not that much room in the place.
It was such a good gig. I love that gig.
So when people come to your gigs, would you say that they are like actually people who have found out about your music because they've heard it somewhere or they've heard it from someone? Or is it still mostly your friends and family? Or is it like a mix of both? What would you say?
Definitely still a mix. But early on, there was a lot of friends and family that would come out. That was most of the people who come out. And, progressively as we gig more, less friends and family want to keep coming out and seeing us. But it's definitely a lot more people. There's a good few regulars that come out to our gigs, and it's good to see the same faces there. But more often than not, it's new people. And it's because we tend to be supporting other bands more than running our own events. And we feel that's really good for us because that way we get more faces to come see us. And so when we do put on our own event, we're not oversaturating the scene because, like we said, it's a very small place. So you can't play too many gigs there all at the same time. Otherwise, nobody's going to come out to them.
But since you've mentioned the collaborations and gigging with someone else, so this is a very good way, and I think it's really smart for you to do that. But then tell me about your favorite bands or like who you hang out with in Adelaide. Do you hang out with Hilltop Hoods?
Unfortunately not.
Kind of like up the road from them.
But you always hear from like parents and teachers, all like people who are the generation older than us, all did hang out with Hilltop Hoods, and so a couple of teachers from my school. One of them was good mates with them.
Yes, they're very popular. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I actually accidentally, this is probably the only one band from Adelaide that I know. I kind of bumped into them, and they introduced themselves and like, we are Hilltop Hoops. So I'm like, I know who you are. So I was a bit starstruck, to be honest. But no, tell me about the bands that are like up and coming and emerging ones that you think are great and everybody should know.
Really, really great one. I actually went on a Spain and Portugal tour recently. It was their first international tour as well, which was surprising that they made it all the way to Europe. But that one's Lola.
Okay.
And they are this punk band from Adelaide who's really, really going quite far, actually. And when all the really big international acts come to Adelaide, they're always the one who are supporting those guys. And they actually passed on a gig that they couldn't play to us. And that was the biggest gig that we've played yet. And so, I have to definitely give those guys a massive head nod because they're really great guys and they have a really cool, like pretty hardcore punk sound. And they know how to get a crowd going. They really know how to rile them up.
You have some pretty famous festivals in Adelaide as well. So WOM Adelaide, obviously, and I think you've got the Adelaide Festival as well. Have you had a chance to play any, I'm not saying these two, but just any other ones?
So yeah, our manager actually told us to talk about this and I completely forgot about it, but we are on board the Adelaide Fringe Festival.
Okay.
And so that's probably the biggest festival that goes on across Adelaide because it's just everything music and arts for about a whole month. And so there's just events that are going on in Adelaide every single day and probably, close to 100 events just spread across Adelaide. And so it's this reasonably big deal to be a part of it. And we've got ourselves signed up for this program called 10 by 10, where 10 bands in Adelaide are paired up with 10 filmmakers and they make a music video in 10 days.
I've heard of it. Yeah, that's cool. let's talk more about you as a band and like your music and stuff. So when you came to the band, was it like natural that you took the roles that you are kind of in at the moment? So have you been trying out some other configurations, or was it pretty natural from the start who was going to be doing what in the band?
Well, when we're all really quite young, we were always musicians, all of us, but we all played each other's instruments when we were first starting out. Like I myself, I'm a bassist, but when I first started playing music, I was a drummer. And Viddy, he's the guitarist, and when he first started, he was playing bass. And Kai, when he first started, he was playing guitar, and now he's a drummer. And so we all did, bit of a switch around, and then we became the band, and it's just always stuck like that.
Yeah. And also adding on to that, before I was like becoming like lead singer, we actually had our own singer, Cassie, who was like a girl, who was like with us for our first gig when we started as a band. We only had like one gig with her, but just for that year, we're just trying to figure out our jobs. And then I was like getting singing lessons, because I did sing for a while. I used to do like musical theatre and stuff and sing. And then I was like trying to learn how to play and sing at the same time. And then it's just gone out from there with our roles, So trying to play our part in the band.
So theoretically speaking, if anything happened, like, and you needed to switch instruments for a gig, would you be able to?
If it was just for like one song and we had time to rehearse, I reckon I could play the guitar for it. I reckon Viddy could swap and do bass.
Yeah.
Oh no, wait, I reckon Viddy, could swap and do drums, and I reckon Kai might struggle a bit, but I reckon he could do bass because Viddy's the better drummer out of myself, us two, and I'm the better guitarist out of Kai and myself, and no one cares about the bassist, so he may as well play bass.
Well, here's an idea for you for a gig. You should do it for like 3 songs so people could see how versatile of musicians you are, So if you just jump on different instruments, that would be something really cool.
What's interesting about that is that we have tried that a couple of times, because sometimes at gigs we actually recruit like one of our mates from this other band to join up and play or sing or do something with us, like, because it's kind of just a thing a lot of the bands in the Adelaide scene do, or in just any music scene do. Just do like a little collab on stage.
That's the thing is that actually sort of backtracking with that, we talk with a lot of people who have toured around Australia, and they say that Adelaide scene is one of the most unusual places to play in Adelaide because the people who go out and see the music are more often than not also in bands. And they say in Melbourne you don't get that. People who are in bands tend to not go out and see other bands and support them nearly as much as what Adelaide does. And I think that's the great thing is just that it's everyone just backing each other and trying to give support, and it's like a reciprocal thing. Like if these guys go out and see your gig, you go out and see their gig, and it's probably one of the best parts about playing in Adelaide is because it is that small and it's what you have to do to survive. But it's not a bad thing. You really do enjoy going out and trying to support people as much as you can.
But going back to what you were saying, because you mentioned that you'd always been musicians, kind of like when you met, you were already like musicians that you could play instruments. So are you from musical families, or was it just a hobby that your parents supported? How did it come to you playing instruments in the first place?
It was all like pretty spontaneous for myself because I was, I think, 5 or 6 when I first started playing the drums. And I think it was what's his name from the Muppets, the drummer from there. What's his?
The Animal?
Animal, yeah. This Muppet just smashing it out on the drums, and I thought, oh, how cool! I'll give that a go. And my dad's a big fan of the whole grunge '90s scene. He was really into that when he was a kid, and so he, of course, supported me when I wanted to be a drummer, and got me my first drum kit for my birthday, and then it turns out I hated the drums, so I started playing bass.
Yeah.
What about you, Viddy?
Yeah.
How did you start?
So at school, like primary school, one of my friends, Oliver, just started playing the guitar, acting like and when you like see someone playing guitar for the first time in your life, you think, wow, that's the greatest. Like you look at them, and I thought, I want to play guitar too. So I started like playing bass, and then went on to guitar because I was that into it. From what I know about Kai, he got into drums because he was like with his mate Jaden, and he said, oh, you should be the drummer, so he started learning drums.
On that note as well, so when you listed your influences, for instance, on your page, I think it says Royal Blood, Carnival, Muse, and Nothing But Thieves. So they're not really kind of like your generation. So who introduced you to those bands? How did you come across them? Like, how did you get interested in like this sort of music?
Mostly for myself, listening to this stuff. So the big standout there, Carnival, they're Aussie guys. And that was an introduction from Will, and he got that from his guitar teacher.
Mm.
But the rest of those guys and all these other alternative rock things was just stuff that I learned on YouTube, because I'm self-taught on the bass. I learned everything off YouTube and just tutorial videos there and whatever I taught myself from that point. And and I just went down that rabbit hole, and the generation that was teaching the music on YouTube was the generation that was listening to that sort of music. And so there was never really like an exact point in time where you like started listening to it. Like my parents listened to some of the stuff I listened to, but it's just all stuff that you learn along the way as you slowly start picking your instrument more and you start really wanting to learn the technical sort of stuff and what all the really cool musicians do. Then you start finding out who all the cool bands are and who makes all the cool music. And
yeah, like with Nothing But Thieves though, that was a bit different because I mean I did hear that like one of I think it was like their most popular song, Amsterdam. I heard that like when I was getting into guitar, and I didn't listen to it. It was just like for a couple of months. Maybe my mum or dad were playing in the car. That's like the only song they knew too. But then I rediscovered it when we started like playing as a band, and I was thinking, wow, what an awesome band! You know, they're pretty awesome, and they're actually coming down to Adelaide too to do a tour or something. But I got more into their music, and I listening to all their kind of music was very diverse in the songwriting. So that's kind of a massive influence on us because it's just different, you know, especially for new kind of rock music.
Yeah, and have you ever seen any of those bands live? Have you had the chance yet?
Yeah.
You have. Okay.
Yeah. We've seen me and Joey and Kai have seen Royal Blood live.
it was a very special night. All of us went together for a little dinner date before that, and then it was actually a Christmas surprise for both Viddy and Kai that go out, and it was just their parents at the dinner table saying, "Oh, guess what, guys? After this, we're seeing Royal Blood. Yay!"
Yeah.
And me and Kai saw Nothing But Thieves last year at Groove in the Moon. I'm going to see them again this year. I don't know about you guys, but they probably do too.
But with all these, I've seen, well, apart from Carnival, I haven't seen Carnival, but you know that Ian also plays in Birds of Tokyo, yeah? I've seen Birds of Tokyo and at a very unusual place because I went to Australian Open once and they have this live stage at Australian Open and they were one of the headline acts. But Carnival is much heavier, and like all of these bands that I've just mentioned that before that we've been talking about, what they have in common is like really heavy guitar riffs, which is the parts that I like, for instance. And I love the bass there as well. So yeah. And Royal Blood, you know, just being the two of them, the amount of noise and like, you know, what they create with those two instruments only, it's pretty mind-blowing to me. So anyway, so you're a pretty new band, like in my world, if you know what I mean. But you've already dropped like an extended place on an EP, and that is a pretty bold move, I would say, because people, what they normally do when they're kind of like an emerging band, well, from my experience and when I speak to bands, they try to like suss it out, like dropping singles and seeing how that traction builds up, whilst you release, as far as I see from your streaming, 2 singles and then all of a sudden the EP. So I want to know like about that decision. So you kind of felt that it was the right time already, or did you want to make an experiment and see what happens? Because, you know, it's a big investment as well, I can imagine, because it's not for free, obviously. So,
well, it wasn't a massive investment because Kai's family friend, he's been friends with these guys since he was a kid, and he has a recording studio at his home. It's just multiple thousands of dollars worth of equipment all in his basement. And he's just that type of generous person where he's just like, yeah, I love doing this. I want you guys just to be here for free. And so obviously we could turn that offer. And the first time recording with him was a great experience. But when we keep going back, things just kept getting better. And we were ready to release just a massive body of music because we had all the songs backed up, ready to go. And it was really experimental because, yeah, everyone does go down the single path. And maybe that should have been the path that we went down in retrospect because we don't see a huge amount of streams from the songs we released.
Mhm.
But that was never really a massively important part of the process for us. Like, as much as we do really appreciate, gaining streams for songs, it was more about just having that body of music there for people who have seen us and who enjoy us to be able to listen to. Even though it's not all that long, it's only like a 6-track EP. I think it does make for quite an interesting experience because for my birthday, my 18th birthday actually, these guys got it pressed on vinyl for me.
But how lucky are you to have to be hooked up with the recording studio at this stage,
Oh,
be able to do
We
that?
are eternally blessed. We
Very.
thank Tim every day. He's such a beautiful soul, very, very, very kind person who's been very, very good to us. And we hope that one day we get rich and famous as a band so we can be very good to him as well.
Yes, let's fingers crossed. Before we talk about the new song, what I found is obviously in your press release, it's like how you wrote the new song, and it says that you were inspired in the Pilates studio, which is probably the last place I would have thought of when it comes to like thinking of music. So, talk me through your creative process. How does it normally happen?
It is really quite a peculiar process because we've tried many, many different ways of writing songs. And the best way where we get the best results and sound, feel, energy, and everything for a song is when we're in Viddy's mum's Pilates studio. And so we have a rehearsal area, which is at Kai's shed, where it's just in a shed, but it's this massive reverby room and it's really loud. And so you always have to have earplugs in there because you just go deaf after 2 minutes. But in the Pilates studio, it's just this beautiful yoga essence in there. And it's very calm and relaxing and it helps the creative juices flow. And so we're sitting on yoga balls playing our instruments and we've tried sending riffs to each other on phones and humming things and whatnot. But it's just when we're right there in the moment all together, something just happens and we all just end up working together and someone says, hey, wait a minute, do that again. And then we just build it off there. And so half of our music, at least, was written in the Pilates studio.
It's a really good place. Like with a new song, when we like wrote it in the studio, like we've got the recording of us playing it for the first time, just a run through of what we wrote in that night in the studio. That riff I brought to Kai and Joey like a couple of years ago, like one of the main riff in the song, and they didn't like it. Like I sent it over text, and then like a year and a half later, I'm like, oh, here's the riff, and they go, that's really good, and then we work with it.
Like you didn't introduce it or anything. You were just messing about on his guitar, and it's just like you do really lose something over the phone when you're trying to send recordings of what you think sounds really good. But he was just messing about playing it on his guitar just by himself, and I was like, hang on a minute, man, do that again. And I don't think he realized what he did was at the time, because I think he was really just messing about. But yeah, it's just for something to work, you have to be able to really hear it live and in person. I think it's just that's the only way we've ever been able to write any of our songs is that it always has to be in person because it just doesn't sound right otherwise.
But that's about the kind of like the sonic layer and like the sonic thing, So it's like you write the music together, but who writes the lyrics? Is it you, Viddy, because you sing, or is it all of you together as well?
All of us usually.
All of us usually.
Viddy usually gets down like the roots of the thing, the structure or the melodies, and then like the structure, the words and points, and then both myself and Kai, really go through with a fine-tooth comb and say, this is the right word for what you're trying to say here because, we all have a bit of a funny way with words and we just try and make the best words possible to suit the song. But we feel that we all have an influence on what each and every person plays because all of us do know pretty much how to play each other's instruments, some better than others because I suck at drums. but I still try and tell Kai how to play the drums anyway. It's chaotic.
Sometimes it might go through like a 5-minute argument, and then we realize actually that's a really good idea.
But just to clarify, so when you are in the Pilates studio, it's just about the vibe and the energy of the place. You're not actually doing Pilates.
We should actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to sing from your core, and working on that core strength with the Pilates really helps Vidi to be as powerful of a vocalist as he is.
On the topic of the songs, let's go back to the music. So this is how the Change of Mood, the new song, right, was kind of created in the studio.
Oh, it was very spur of the moment. Like, a lot of our stuff that we sit down and written down, because we always do the musical side of things first before the lyrics, and we can always have an idea in our head for what melodies go where with what guitar riffs. That all actually comes really easy to us, whereas other people, they tend to like have the story and lyrics in front of them and then work around it with the music. We always go with what we think is going to be sonically the best thing in the background, and then work towards the melody. Yeah. And that's what we've done with Change of Mood. And so we put together this really pretty indie song, which is probably one of the lighter songs that we've made so far. And yeah, there was no problem with that, because it was supposed to be something that was a little bit more beautiful and like heartfelt, and kind of a little bit gut-wrenching as well, because it's a bit of a sad song with the lyrics. We were just on radio talking about this the other day, and we try to make our songs not to be, this is going to sound lazy, but we try to make it really quite non-specific the way we write our lyrics, because we feel that as a listener, you like to identify to the lyrics and create your own narrative to it, rather than have a story and say, well, this is what it's about. And so with Change of Mood, it's about conflict between people, and for each listener, it's a different story, because you listen to the lyrics and you might think of an ex that you broke up with and how you and her were like this, or you might think of your mate that you had a falling out with, or it's one of those things where we want people to be able to listen to the song and be able to relate with it, because we feel like that's the most important way to have people listen to music, is to emotionally connect with what we're writing. And so that's what we really tried to get across with that song, is to have it as an open canvas for people to create their own narrative when they listen to that song. This is what it means to them, rather than we think that the song should mean this.
So do you think about a specific topic that you want to talk about, or does it come, or like the song structure musically determines like kind of like the lyrics and what the story is going to be?
Real structure, it's never really had an impact, weirdly, because we've had some pretty heavier songs that we've done that have had really bizarre themes. But I guess the emotion is just what feels right, and it's how we're feeling like at the time when we write it. Like in the Pilates room, we knew how we wanted the song to feel when we were writing Change of Mood, and we said it there, like before we even had pen on paper and writing any words. We said, this is how we want the song to feel. This is kind of what we want it to be about, because this is how it sounds right now as we're listening to it, just even without the lyrics or melody there. We always do the title last. And yeah, it's usually like just before we get it out on streaming platforms as well. It's very, very much last minute. It's like, oh guys, we have to have everything ready. What are we calling it?
So what is your favorite bit about being in the band? Is that the songwriting bit when you're all in the room all together? Is it like when you go out and play to people? Or is it like, I don't know, interactions with fans? Or is it like the marketing bit? Whatever that is. What do you think that is for you?
I love all of it. Personally.
All of it is really great, but we all have a very, very fond spot for the recording, I think, because it's like a holiday for us, really, because it's just no matter what's going on with, school or work or whatever, we all just take the time to relax and record. And it's what feels natural to us. It's the most, if you were to sum us up as people, seeing us as we're recording is us, our essential selves, it's really what we are as people. And so that's why it has such a soft spot. But I think there's really no other feeling as well, like going out and playing those songs live and just seeing so many beautiful faces at gigs. That's just a whole nother experience that you can't miss.
Have you noticed anything that, like in the music business in general so far, something that you didn't expect when you kind of entered? this? I mean, not entered, but when you started the adventure, let's say.
That is a really, really good question. But I think the part that really that doesn't click with any young person when they're starting out in a band is that there is the 10%, which is the recording and the playing live, and then the 90%, which is everything else. That's all the social media. That's all the endless emails. So many emails. And it's just, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and that was a real shock for all of us. It's just like how much there actually was to being part of a band. And I love it actually as much. That's kind of going back to your previous question, but I do love that whole management side of things, and I'm not taking on the whole managerial role. That's Beck does a major part in that, and we're very, very thankful to Beck because she does a lot of good work with us.
So how involved are you in that business side, if I may ask?
Well, we try to be as involved as possible because it is very much our band, and we try to be as connected with it as possible in all aspects. And so with that, we talk with Beck and say, look, what can you fork off to us? What can we have as our own little solo project? And so some of us are doing these like emailing projects. Kai, our drummer, he's working on a project for mid-year where we're booking out a venue for our single launch, and he's looking after that whole thing. And Vidi does so much that I can't even name anything off the top of my head. We enjoy doing the stuff, and we feel like it is valuable knowledge to have all these connections and people skills that we wouldn't have had otherwise if we weren't in a band.
I'm glad that you're enjoying it at the moment. Last question, I promise. What would be your like ultimate goal and like your ultimate ambition?
We always said that we wanted to get over to the UK for what festival was it again? Glastonbury. Always wanted to be.
Who doesn't?
Always wanted to be on that stage, and then it's just wanting to be part of the festival circuit in Australia as well, because really great part about Australia is that the festivals go on, they're touring festivals, and so they're going state by state, and we definitely want to find ourselves on that lineup, and that's definitely something that's a little bit further down the track, but we do really hope that we see ourselves in that place.
It's a very good energy. Like we've already had a bit of a glimpse of it, like of what it could be like, just playing in those big crowds with a few shows, and it's just a proper goal, just playing in front of those big crowds, because the gigging part, just that adrenaline, big crowd engagement, it's the best drug that you can get, like for any artist. It's just such a good feeling, and then after you're in a buzz and you get to have, just reminisce on it for the next year,
But just mention maybe one Aussie festival or like the touring one, like you mentioned, that you would really want to be a part of.
Well, it would probably end up being Groove in the Mood if they still end up doing those festivals, as much as that one's being cancelled this year. That's always probably one of the bigger ones that people really enjoy being at. But there's new festivals coming out all the time in Australia, and I love that. Like there's this massive metal and punk festival, Good Things.
Yes,
and
I know it.
I've always been wanting to get to the East Coast for that, because they go, Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, and no one ever comes to Adelaide. But that's definitely one that I love to be on, as much as because we are just that little bit heavier than the usual crowd. Probably not quite nearly as heavy as some of the bands that are on that lineup, but still just love to be there, because I feel like the shows that you want to see are the shows you want to play on as well.
So thank you very much for your time, and I'm really excited about you guys. Well, I even wrote down this quote because Shannon from that High Fidelity show, she said, get on the Newgate Crowd wagon, because then you get a hipster cred of saying you were into them before they were huge. So fingers crossed.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's it, ladies and gents. I hope you've enjoyed this chat with Joey and Vidi from Newgate Crowd, and that you'll take away some interesting insights about the Adelaide music scene. Our conversation was actually a little longer, but you don't want to hear about the fan in the room where Joey and Vidi connected from making weird noises, right? Or my cat walking all over my computer keyboard because she's on a diet, so she's constantly hungry and demanded more food. But I do want to add 2 things before letting you go. Number 1, have a look at the show notes, because Newgate Crowd shared a playlist with me that contains, wait for it, over 7 hours of music. I'm not even joking. And I don't know most of the acts on that playlist because many times they're very, very local Aussie bands, which is a good thing. This is your and my chance to dig a little deeper into the scene. Secondly, I read on Newgate Crowd's channels that they brought a cake for the presenter when they were interviewed on the radio one day. What a nice touch on their part, hey? It wouldn't have worked for our virtual chat, but I found out that Vidi makes a mean tiramisu. So, since I'm a sweet tooth, I do have a very good reason to return to Adelaide now. But seriously though, check out Newgate Crowd's channels and especially their music. They recently dropped a music video for Change of Mood, the single we discussed in the chat. And please do support local emerging bands, dear listeners. You never know where they'll be in a few years from now. See you next time in this new Spotlight segment. Bye now!